Growing up, my family had always been deeply Catholic, and religion was very important in my life at the time. We went to church every Sunday and prayed before every meal. In our family, we were only 6: me, Dad, Mom, my sisters Emily and Jenna, and the dog Max. Emily was only 2 years younger than me, and I felt a lot closer to her. Jenna, on the other hand, was the family baby. Still, we were very united. But then when I was 18, Max died. I was never very close to him, but it affected Jenna a lot, who was only 9 at that time. We had also just moved to a larger house in the countryside, almost excluded from society, meaning we had to change schools and leave our friends behind. This, added to the death of our dog, caused little Jenna to become depressed. She wanted to be alone all the time and barely spoke a word to me anymore. All the fun we used to have together just turned into the past, or a recollection of memories. For a while, I genuinely believed she would never recover. My dad, my mom, Emily, and I tried everything to cheer her up, but nothing ever worked. Going to Disney, going on holidays, buying her toys, watching her favorite movies, it didn't matter. All she did was cry uncontrollably at the thought of Max. My mom suggested buying a different dog to replace him. I agreed, but my dad thought it could also achieve the opposite effect, and that my sister could reject him, even unconsciously. This went on for months. Eventually, my dad became sick of the situation and worried that she would never move on. He brought in a new dog into the house, of a different breed, of course. The new dog was much bigger, with a pointy snout. My mom made it clear that he would not replace Max and would just be a new addition to the family. Jenna didn't really pay any attention to the new dog for a few days, but it didn't take long for her to start smiling and giggling again as she played with him. It had been almost half a year since I heard her laugh, but still it didn't feel like everything was back to normal, at least not to me. Jenna never really treated me the same as before the death of Max. The days where we played hide and seek nonstop or chased each other around the swimming pool were over. She had become cold towards me. Sometimes it felt as if I was just a burden for her. As she grew closer to the new dog, I noticed she had begun calling him Eamon. It was strange because it wasn't an unusual name or one I had heard before. In fact, I don't even think we had officially named the new dog. I just referred to him as the dog. One part of me was happy as it felt like she was slowly recovering, but another part of me knew something wasn't right. It was a gut feeling. One of those you have when you know you are absolutely right about something. Still, I tried to ignore it. Nothing interesting happened for a couple of weeks. Then one night I woke up to a gentle breeze. It felt odd because it was in the middle of June when days are a lot hotter. I turned around in my bed and saw how my window was not fully closed. This was also strange as I specifically remember closing it before going to bed. But then I figured it was probably my mom, so I didn't suffocate with the heat. I got up to shut it, but then I noticed a figure standing in our porch. Our new house was quite big. I was on the 2nd floor alongside Emily, whilst my parents and Jenna slept on the 3rd floor. My room was just above the porch, which was also the entrance to the house. I was stunned to see the shape of a person just standing there. It was very dark, so I couldn't make out any facial features, although I can say with confidence that it looked like a man. I wondered if I should ask anything. Maybe it was someone who got lost. We do live in the middle of nowhere after all. But as I thought what to ask, I saw the figure slowly walk away into the distance. After a few minutes, I could no longer see it. At this point, I was thinking that maybe I hallucinated. I closed my window and went to bed again. I fell asleep fairly quickly. Two days later, I was hanging out with Emily over at the cornfield, which was only a 10-minute walk from our house. We both found it very relaxing, even therapeutic. The sound of the gentle wind hitting the sagebrush transferred you to another dimension where stress didn't exist. Just you and your own thoughts. We both laid on the ground looking at the clouds. I told Emily that I missed going to school and seeing my friends. I was going to go to college shortly, which meant that I'd get to spend less time with my family.
We can still see each other. It's not like you're going to leave the country.
I know, but it just won't feel the same. I'll really miss you, I responded.
I'll miss you too. We will miss you too,
she replied. But our conversation was abruptly interrupted by the presence of Eamon, our dog. He stood behind us, staring at us. We turned around to face him. He didn't seem threatening. It was just a lifeless stare, as if he didn't have a soul. It was weird because he was usually a very energetic and happy dog. I pet him gently. Emily looked at me concerned. "What are you thinking?" I asked.
It's about Jenna. Ever since Max died, she hasn't been the same. Even now with Eamon, she's not the same little girl. And I miss her. I don't know what else we have to do.
I know, I'm worried too, but she seems to be fine with Mom and Dad. Maybe we're overthinking it, I replied.
I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she should get therapy. She's clearly traumatized by what happened, and I can't blame her. I just want the best for her.
We continued talking for a bit, just enjoying the relaxation of the summer, knowing we had no homework pending or any obligation. But deep down inside, I had a bad feeling. I was abruptly woken up a few nights later at 3 a.m. by some horrifying screams. It was Jenna. I rushed out of my bed and up the stairs to her room. When I got there, I saw Mom and Dad calming her down. Thank God, I thought. My dad later explained that she had a horrible nightmare about Max, but that she was feeling a lot better now. I was just glad it was nothing actually serious and that she was okay. The following night, I was downstairs watching a movie with my sister Emily. It was already past midnight and our parents were asleep upstairs. We were only halfway through. I was really tired and struggling to stay awake, while Emily had her eyes wide open and was completely focused on the film. Then we heard Eamon barking outside. It was quite aggressive and threatening. It for sure put me on alert. I slowly got off the couch to see what was happening, with Emily right behind me. I opened the front door and saw Eamon barking into the distance. I yelled at him to stop, but he didn't listen to me. We calmly walked over towards him. As we approached Eamon, I noticed that he was actually barking at somebody. I could see the silhouette of a man, approximately 300 feet away. Emily pulled my arm and whispered to get back inside. I ignored her and continued approaching Eamon. When I got to him, I tried to calm him down. I looked back at the man and he was standing in the exact same position. He didn't move a muscle. It was so dark I couldn't make out any of his facial features. He just seemed to be standing lifeless, staring at our house. Then I remembered what I saw the week prior. It was the same person that was standing in our porch. By then I could visibly see how scared Emily was, which only made me feel worse. I yelled at the man to go away and that we had a gun, which was actually true. My dad owned a shotgun which he hid under his bed. Still no reaction. He just stood there. Emily insisted on getting back inside. We slowly retrieved while still facing the man to have our backs covered. Eventually we noticed he began walking away. I sighed in relief. I waited until the next morning to tell Mom and Dad what happened. My dad called the police to inform them of the incident, but there was nothing they could do, as the man was nowhere to be seen. I woke up again in the middle of the night. My watch marked 2 a.m. It was burning hot in my room. I opened the window to let some fresh air into the room, whilst I headed downstairs for a glass of water. I noticed that Jenna was sitting at the bottom of the stairs. I asked her what she was doing, but she didn't respond. She just faced the floor with a sad look. I picked her up and carried her to her room. I put her on the bed and then she asked me if I loved her. Of course I told her. Her facial expression didn't change though, and she still seemed sad. I left her room and went back to mine, thinking about how weird what just happened was. It was now freezing, so I closed the window and wrapped myself around the blanket before falling asleep. My mom left with Emily and Jenna to do the shopping. Meanwhile, my dad and I went for a walk near our house to enjoy the nature. I must say it was very relaxing. But he just began asking weird questions, like very personal things I don't want to get into. I gave short and cold answers, indicating that I was uncomfortable. He didn't seem to notice or care, though. As we got further from the house, I noticed a man to my right. He was only like 200 feet away. He was wearing jeans and a white shirt and had a careless haircut. But what struck me the most was his pose. He just stood still, staring at nothing. Lifeless. I paused and asked if he needed something. My dad paused too and looked at me. I looked back at Dad and noticed he had a weird expression on his face, as if I had said something crazy. He asked me,
"Son, what are you looking at?"
The hairs on my neck stood up. I pointed at the man that was standing still. But as I looked back, he wasn't there anymore. I knew he was fucking with me. I assumed it was the same man that I had seen lurking around our house on 2 previous nights. I insisted that he was somewhere here, but my dad ignored me. I was in disbelief. He was right there a moment ago. He couldn't have just vanished. That night I woke up yet again very thirsty. I headed downstairs for a glass of water. This time I was surprised to see Eamon at the bottom of the stairs. As I approached him, he turned to face me and started growling at me. This was completely unlike him. He seemed really angry at me, possessed even. I didn't want him to wake anybody up, so I left and went to my room. What the fuck was happening? For the past week, so many strange things had been occurring. Was I going insane? Was this place haunted? I can't stand it anymore. My parents and Emily were heading to the city that night. I don't particularly remember why, as I didn't really bother hearing their explanation. However, Mom made it very clear that I should look after Jenna until they got back, which would be at around 11 p.m. or even midnight. Basically, they wanted me as her babysitter. I tried playing with Jenna, but she wasn't interested. I even offered to play with Eamon as well, but she preferred to be on her own. I took her to her bedroom whilst I went to mine, really just trying to keep her occupied so I could do my own things and not look after her all the time. It got dark quite early and the stress was getting to my head. I ended up falling asleep. Then I woke up only about half an hour later. I heard noises outside as if somebody or something was running around the house. It didn't sound like Jenna nor the dog. I opened my door to see what was happening. I saw Jenna. She was running down the stairs, giggling like a toddler when they know they are being naughty. The house was unusually dark, but I didn't pay attention to that. I went after her to get her back into her room. She was heading towards the kitchen, and so I followed her then. But as I did, I felt something was off. A gut feeling. When I got to the kitchen, I screamed. There was a fucking man standing there, stood still as a statue. His back was facing me, but I could make it out to be the same man I saw a few days prior. The same man I assume had been lurking around the house on previous nights. For the first time in my life, I was scared shitless. How the fuck did he get here, I asked myself. Jenna was standing right behind him with her back facing me. They were both doing the same fucking pose, not moving an inch, not moving a muscle. I tried to scream at him to leave the house, but as the fear consumed my body, I couldn't form words. What I saw next still gives me nightmares to this day. The man began mutating. His body began to expand. A tail started growing out of his back. His hands turned into claws. Horns started coming out of his head. Hair began to cover his whole body. All of this whilst he was screaming to the top of his lungs in pain. It was something you'd only ever see in a sci-fi movie. The bizarre creature, whose back I was still facing, started to absorb Jenna. What the fuck was happening? None of this makes any fucking sense. I wanted to vomit right there and then, but the adrenaline in my body made me run for my life. I ran into my parents' bedroom and grabbed Dad's shotgun. I could hear the creature groaning as it began approaching me. I ran downstairs and outside the house. It was still following me, making inhumane sounds and noises. I tried to hide myself in the family barn, which was only a minute or two away. I covered myself behind some hay. My heart was beating faster than it ever had before. Sweat was dripping from my forehead. I couldn't control my heavy breathing. It felt like I had just run a marathon. Then I heard the creature enter the barn, shouting my name in a distorted way. I continued hiding, praying to God and Jesus that I wouldn't be found. I could hear the heavy footsteps approach me, one at a time, slow and steady but getting closer to me. Eventually they stopped, and I could feel the breath from whatever creature was standing at the opposite side of the hay. Although my location was obvious due to my heavy breathing, I tried covering my mouth with my hand, but by then it was too late. The monster kicked out the hay and cornered me. I began loading the shotgun, although I had no previous experience. As the creature got closer and closer, my heart beat faster and faster. I could hardly hold the shotgun straight, but by a miracle of Christ I was able to load it in time. And I fired. She dropped dead on the floor. Oh God, no, please no. I held her in my arms, crying like I never had before. I tried to cover the gunshot wound, but it was too big. Please, God, don't do this to me. I didn't kill her. It wasn't me. I didn't do that. Please, Jenna, speak to me, please. Oh, God, why did you do this to me? Jenna, please. I'm begging you. Jenna, please. Please don't die. Please don't die.